Okay. So Siddhartha, you have just finished judging the Festival of Media APAC Awards 2021, and you were the illustrious chair. What was it like being the chair of the awards?
So no, thank you very much. And I think, first of all, I was quite honored to be on the jury and then certainly to be jury chair of the Festival of Media. I thought APAC 2021 being the kind of time and the year that we have seen and where the entrants were coming from was significantly different from a lot of the work that we have seen traditionally, or many of us have encountered in the years that we've been dealing with marketing and media. So it was quite a delight to see some great work from some of the usual suspects, some dark horses, in a year that really across the world has been fraught with uncertainty and has been very demanding of innovation in both media and marketing. So there were some close calls, some standout entries, and I think when they do come around to the end of this, it will be worthwhile just looking at the learnings and insights that all of us as brands and marketers can derive from the entries that came in this year.
Oh, fantastic. And on the entries, how good do you think the standard of work was? And I suppose the second part is, do you think it provided a really great representation of the APAC region from a media and marketing perspective?
So there were 5 categories that we were looking at as a jury. I thought in the impact and effectiveness categories, there was a fantastic standard of work that came in. There was also a lot of engagement and a lot of use of amplification of content. I thought versus the traditional media, above the line, TV, out of home, etc. What changed this year was the impact that people have tried to make quite successfully with the use of data and with the use of earned media playing a much larger part either in the media strategy itself or in the amplification of traditional content. So it had to be ideas that broke through from an insight perspective, because the nature of insights was so different from what it has been earlier. The consumer demographics have changed for many of these brands and categories. The landscape that they're operating in has changed, and the behaviors that consumers were engaging in with the brands were quite different. And I thought that made it all the more difficult to put in an entry. I did think that there was a fair representation of work, which was quite broad. It was quite diverse across geographies as well as categories. Um, there may be opportunities, especially in APAC, to look at more vernacular media. I think the nature of entries in most of the award ceremonies tend to be skewed towards English, and I don't know whether there are some hidden nuggets of those in different places. There were a couple of good entries that came in, which were in vernacular media as well at the Festival APAC Awards. So it was good to see that there was a representation. I think that's encouraging that brands across and categories and organizations, both large and small, with very different media budgets, entered the awards and thought they had, and they did actually have in the end of it, without giving away the results, a good fighting chance in each of their categories. So that was quite good to see, yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. Almost like the work is speaking for itself, no matter who has produced it. Wow. Was there anything you saw over the afternoon that really kind of took your breath away and you thought, wow, that is amazing, I hadn't thought of that? Or was there, you talked about earned media, which is really interesting, like a rise in that. Was there any other sectors or areas that you saw a rise in, or a trend, I suppose, as you went through the categories?
I think one of the trends that has really come home this time is the actual use of data to make an impact. I think for uh, a decade or more now, all of us as marketeers and media planners, etc., have been talking about how important data is and how data is the new gold, etc. And I think we're now coming to a stage of maturity with actually being able to see uh, how that data leverages insights, is used effectively to drive impact in the marketplace. The other big trend that I think I saw was a shift towards the traditional ROI or sales metrics to a more long-term impact. So I saw a change in both the manner in which the jury were assessing entries, as well as in the entrants themselves. From what they were setting out to achieve was no longer quarterly profits or annual sales numbers, but was really to look at how we can change the narrative in the category, to look at the opportunity that the crisis presented in many of these categories, to make a long-term impact that really set the trend for the new normal. And I think this will be 2020 as well as 21 will be years that will see some changes that will last a really long time in many of these categories, whether it's through consolidation, whether it is through the setting of new behavioral patterns, or in fact the leveraging of data to actually make an impact. That is a societal impact and a contribution back to those categories, rather than simply in terms of a short-term gain in market share.
And that's fantastic to hear, because one of the biggest issues has been a lot of talk in the industry and not a lot happening when it comes to that space. People saying they're doing certain things and not actually following through. So it's wonderful to hear that, you know, one good thing to come out of the pandemic is people have started to realize the importance and I suppose the power of media and marketing across the way. Was there anything in the, as you were judging, was there anything there that just kind of stood out for you, head and shoulders above, without giving too much away? Was there one campaign or category that really kind of, you know, was so amazing, you kind of, wow, that's a great idea?
There were a couple of interesting things that came out, especially in the discussions with the jury, that I thought were quite interesting. I mean, three trends that I did pick up uh, in the discussions with the jury. One was the openness of the jury to look at the different categories, and how the discussion was so much more evolved in the ability to look at what is the nature of awards that we should be giving. To take a couple of examples, there were brands that traditionally don't get awarded or evaluated, and we had to look at those from a fairly objective perspective in the categories like alcohol, for example, or tobacco, where there were a few entries. And I thought that some of the brands in those categories made a concerted effort to actually leverage data to desell or to target specifically individuals. In the case of, for example, tobacco, to not look at increasing the consumption of tobacco, but to move behaviors, but not reach out to individuals who were outside of or should be outside the sphere of influence, whether that be young people or non-smokers, etc. I thought that the other key thing that certainly came out was the long-term impact that many of these brands are trying to make, um, beyond just the category itself. And because it was something that they were doing which was very fresh in the way in which they're thinking, the learnings that came from some of these categories, I think, can be deployed across other regions and categories. So some of the work that was done that we have seen come in this year, I thought was work uh, that those insights will get leveraged, and those insights will grow into becoming category truths over a period of time. So the really brands taking advantage of a first mover data or media strategy that really hasn't been thought of before. In terms of the best campaigns, I did think that the some of the government campaigns, which typically don't cut the ice, but if you take the example of the New Zealand government campaign on Unite Against COVID-19, from an effectiveness perspective, uh, the way in which they looked at the insights from a cultural insight perspective to see what are the aspects of New Zealand's culture in terms of the Hofstede model, and how do we look at that and therefore change the narrative, as well as the openness with which individuals will engage within their communities and with the government to not just comply with, but actually take up proactively some of the measures that influence, to a large extent, I think, the success with which that country has dealt with the pandemic, which is an inspiration for others to follow. So if those are some of the big takeouts for me, at least.
No, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And I suppose one final question for you. We always have this discussion every year, and I think more than ever, kind of people entering awards, it's a great kind of cost-effective marketing tool from a content perspective. But how important do you think awards are for brands and for agencies? Is it something that, from an AirAsia perspective, that you are really kind of keen to see the work amplified? Is it something that you think the industry really kind of needs?
I think so. I think that one of the things which happened when we were starting this discussion was we were looking at the opportunity that especially with all the talk, as I said, which has happened over the last decade or so about data, programmatic, etc., which has come in, is that the differentiation between how different brands approach their media buying has largely moved from creative to the ability to leverage technology. And what came out in this period is because behaviors have changed so much, that the onus on creative to come out with a new groundbreaking thought suddenly seemed to matter again. The other thing that came out, because it was a fairly diverse jury as well, was the degree to which we were looking forward to the APAC awards, with some of us having spent time working and interacting in other geographies like Europe and the Americas. That Asia Pacific usually tends to break new ground in terms of creative, and it was really heartening to see that continue to happen to a very large extent, even more than it did in many other geographies. Or the kind of campaigns that we have seen, I think that are things that the world could learn from. So there's still a lot that APEC has to offer in that space. I don't know if that completely answers the question or if I missed out on any aspect, but I did think that that stood out.
No, that's fantastic. Asia has been a leader in so many ways, and across our program of global awards, you often find the Asia winners doing very well in the global program later on in the year. So it is still up there as a key driver, I think, globally, which is wonderful. Well, Siddhartha, thank you very much for giving up your time to judge. It's been a pleasure.